song, I guess. You're
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to sign up for the theme song quite yet, but we'll see.
Come on, man, we'll make it hit. That'll get the group pumping.
Well, let's see. It is Friday, October 1st today, and we've got a core group here. I don't know if we've quite hit quorum, but I think we're good enough to get things kicked off. Just kind of start a slow day to the session. So shall we head around the room and note any trends or changes or things happening in each other's world?
I'll go, I guess. So as I mentioned just before we started here, working through Launch Alaska's accelerator right now with Turnagain Heavy Lift, making some interesting connections, both here in Alaska and with some cohort members outside of the state. So I've been pretty excited about that. On the community front of things, I have a meeting with Purpose, which is an organization in Colorado that's been pretty active, I'd say, in alternative forms of corporate ownership, and excited to learn some things in consulting with them in a meeting next week. Practicality of all that is getting the structure of my own company set up to allow for a steward ownership model, and excited to see how that process looks from a legal standpoint and an administrative standpoint, and come back and report to the group lessons learned. That's all I got today. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pascual. From my side, we keep seeing, well, I know some folks involved in some real estate, and we keep seeing an influx of people coming to the state looking for a way to combine life and work, which kind of ties with live play that ADC has happening. But anyway, the point that I was trying to make is that we still see that influx of people coming looking for exactly what Alaska has to offer that is hard to find in the lower 48. Low commute, healthy environment, despite the COVID, which that's a whole different subject, but we don't have the 2-hour commute San Francisco has. It's really easy to get in 10 minutes driving out in the wilderness. And pretty much we have everything we need here. And they are looking for places to grow that family. So maybe COVID ramp up that intention. Maybe COVID started to make people realize that, yeah, we need to do that now. And we see that little step. If it's going to continue or not, we don't know that yet, but that trend that we start seeing in summer keeps going, decreases speed, but it's still there. That's all I have.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, things are making progress. We got one workaway settled in who's kind of just animal care, nice woman. And then I've got another guy coming today, actually, who's got a little bit more building experience. So I'm going to have somebody to help me do some building this winter. Pretty stoked about that. Also just kind of, yeah, exploring the community side of stuff. Cryptocurrency still is decentralized autonomous organizations are still on my peripheral, but I'm very interested in. Yeah, so find their place, you know, myself included and my people, and we can make forward progress in the world. So also, Bradley, man, I'd love to see one of these big drones fly sometime. I don't know if you ever got a little spot we could come and hang out and watch a flight or something, or check out the equipment or see what you're up to. I'm curious and have been for a long time. So
I'm working on that, and partners I'm meeting through Launch Alaska are working on that as well. It's about permission to fly, and looking forward to getting that one way or another in the coming months.
Right on. Well, I look forward to it. Yep.
All right. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that too. I can't wait to see what you end up picking up and putting down in places around Alaska. Hey, Laura, welcome. It looks like she's connecting audio. Hi, Laura, welcome. We're just making our way around the room. It's just you and me left, but I won't make you jump right in and do yours first. Let you catch your breath for a minute. Glad you could make it. So, man, my week, I feel like I have been playing the equivalent of The Floor is Lava this past couple of weeks, and just kind of like hopping between spaces and kind of like watching as everything is sort of like shifting and moving around for me. And it's an exciting game, but it certainly feels a little bit unstable. And in the process, I've been realizing that some of the things that I have been hopping back and forth with, maybe I'm just trying to carry too much and do too much, which is a hard thing for me to be able to admit, because it's also dang interesting. But the reality starts to set in. So I'm starting to look around and get serious about what things are really core to who I am and worth carrying forward. And that's a big part of why I'm here, because this is definitely core to who I am. I love this state. So I have been also really feeling the chicken and the egg problem this week. There's just a couple different situations or things that are going on where it's like, well, we've got this resource and we have this, but until we get this other thing, then we can't make the two of them come together. And at some point, someone just needs to sort of have some faith and make a try at it. And then, I would bet that it would work out, because that stuff usually does. But it's just being willing to take that risk, or being willing to jump in. And so I, in parallel to figuring out what stuff I'm gonna cut, I'm also figuring out what stuff I'm gonna jump into and try and push on. And so that's kind of an exciting place to be. A little nerve-wracking, but exciting. So that's my week in a nutshell.
You want me to go?
Yes, please.
I mean, holy moly, we are on fire this week. And I'm not 100% sure how long I can stick on this phone call today. I'm just going to hang in there as long as I can until I get pinged and yanked into something else. But we are having we are having some really good feedback. I mean, for us, it's just been absolute hell through most of 2020 and half of 2021. And we made a bunch of really big pivots in the spring, and we are seeing the results, and it sure feels good. Plus, from the founders group meeting that we had last month, I learned for the first time in 6 years of this little thing called fractional executives. And I don't know how we managed to miss that memo, but we hired a fractional CFO on Friday, and they're going to start working for us. And I'm telling you guys, this message has not gotten out to the startup group folks. I think this is a big gap in our ecosystem here, because what is fractional? See, I had the same question on the last founders meeting. We were talking about board of advisors, and I spent most of the summer, and the whole reason we did that Stella Labs thing was because we thought it would help us get in touch with people who would be appropriate on our board of advisors, which we don't really have. We have sort of a board of advisors, but it's not really active. And you know, that Stella Labs thing was such a nothing burger. It was absolutely astonishing. But the founders group meeting, Tim Fulton from Ramper Innovations, you know, I just threw out the question. I'm sorry, I'm very excited. It's cut me off, but I threw out the question of like, hey, what do we know about, let's talk about advisory boards. And hey, I saw on a slide deck last week, somebody was using the word fractional, and what is that? And Tim Fulton for Ramper said, oh yeah, it just means a part-time CFO. You just hire them. And I was like, well, where do you find that? He said, you Google it. Anyway, I spent last couple of weeks researching this, and sure enough, this is something that our entire ecosystem should have access to and doesn't know about. And if I just even think of how valuable it would have been to have a CFO giving us real advice for all this time that we had money. Okay, that's it, I'm done. Oh, can I just say one more thing? Because I am very excited. We have had cost of customer acquisition in our time anywhere from like, $80 to $120 per customer was not unusual. We got really excited when it would go down into the 60s sometimes and 70s sometimes. Our cost of customer acquisition is down to 40 now. So we're making money. Okay, I'm done.
Man, well, I'm so this is sparking some thoughts for me. I'm really curious what made that shift or how you got it down to 40, because that is such a, I mean, you cut it.
Fired our marketing people, and we fired our, we quit doing Facebook ads.
Huh. All right.
And we took over all our marketing, and we did what we could over the summer. And then we found somebody lower cost marketing. And
Cool.
really, they're just focusing on email right now. And our return customer rate is kind of astronomical. So that was the other thing, is once we cut out our Facebook ads, we could actually see like that foundation that we built. Because Facebook was just driving a bunch of bullshit to our website. And we knew that because the return on ad spend was low. But once we cleared out that fog, we could really see half of our customers were coming back to buy more. So our lifetime value, I don't still know how to calculate it, by the way, but our lifetime value is, I'm sure, so much higher than it was prior to this.
Well, that's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, fractional executive sounds like a really another really cool thing too, and that ties in my mind with. Sorry, my cats are going a little crazy here. That also ties in my mind to the work that Bradley's doing on bringing the team together and setting up the purpose of an organization. So it's been really cool to hear how your learning has unfolded and how that develops for you both.
Well, I would just say, I think one of the things that we're so shy of in Alaska is financial advice. I mean, if you look at like our history is a good example of where do we get financial advice? We have a list of all the places that we've gotten financial advice from. And, I think we've gotten maybe more than the average Joe Alaska startup, especially if you're earlier stage. And it is absolutely inadequate. I mean, we've been searching and searching and searching. So I just think, wow, our ecosystem has a drought of financial advisors that can really help us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Ryan, I love what a great cat dad you are. It's a very interesting effect with the call. A similar thing with my cat, so I'm inside. So glad I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, their brother is out for a walk with mom right now, and so that means that they're a little bit more lively. So they're both in the room, and I think they would both really like me to open the window for them right now. So I'll probably stand up in a minute and do that. But yeah, they like to join in when they can. Yeah, I'm thinking of the agenda items that we have for the day. I know that we had talked, or we're hoping to talk about the retreat. And I know that Kitty was going to be leading that portion of the conversation, and she's out for today. She sent in a note that she's not going to be able to make it.
Remind me what date that is.
Let me look that up.
I can look it up. I don't want to derail the conversation. I'm interested in participating and I think I'm open. This is like to Girdwood, right?
Mhm.
Why is it isn't it only an hour meeting?
I think that it maybe
There
is
was discussion about being overnight, right? And having it involve hikes and yeah, lots of.
So it's more than an hour. I mean, I like the idea. I want to drive down to Girdwood for it. I just kind of would like to have a little more, I don't want to drive down for a 1 hour thing. I think we could get more done, put it that way.
I think so too. And I think that's the goal, is to have the opportunity for a real deep dive. I think the big question that we have for us is what's the direction that we want to head as Alaska version 3 and this group, to kind of keep things in their current form and just let it spin for another year doesn't necessarily make the most sense. But how do we set things up so in a way that does make sense? What's the direction that we think that we should head? What meets the core of who we are as an organization and what we're trying to achieve? And so I think that we looked at the Saturday, the 23rd of October, potentially stuff on the 22nd and potentially stuff on the 24th. I think there was some talk of an all night or an overnight time down there. And so I think I was thinking of at least most of Saturday, the 23rd, going towards this conversation and getting folks together.
Brian, was there supposed to be a survey, or did I miss it, that was going out about the retreat, including different layers of COVID prevention?
I think that there was a survey. I saw something come through last week, but I was out last week, and so I missed the conversation and the survey. I think it's probably sitting in my inbox. But that is a good reminder for us to come back together on that thing. Were you able to see that survey? Do you want to get that sent your way?
I would appreciate it if it's still relevant. I didn't see it come through, but I occasionally miss emails in the torrent.
Yeah,
I don't think I saw it either.
Already.
My friend got a hold of my phone last weekend and he was horrified because if you look at my main screen, it says that I have 41,000 unread messages. I don't know how that's possible, but I do know that I tried to read everything.
That's a lot of unread messages.
Ryan, while you're looking that up, I might ask Laura, how is the process of finding a fractional C-suite person been for you? I assume you're talking about a CFO is what you took on?
Yeah. So it was a really good process, Bradley. It was really interesting. It felt like so much relief compared to the last 2 years prior. So he's right. You Google it and you just Google fractional CFO. Now Tim gave me the name of one company that he actually used. And he had a kind of a weird thing that happened. So it didn't work out with him. They hired somebody and then there was a bunch of things that happened. They ended up getting their money back. So they're going to do another one. He said he was going to use the same company. After I talked to a whole bunch of people, I ended up with the same company he did. So we just really found somebody at that particular company that we really liked. But I talked to probably I had meetings with maybe 4 different companies and you can kind of tell where they're at. Like the first guy I talked to, CFO, CPA, he's also a lawyer. He does, mergers and acquisitions. He gives you lots of advice, and you know, it just didn't click with him. I just didn't feel like he had the stuff we were looking for. We talked to a women-owned company, and we got really excited because it was all women founded and owned, and they were just, I couldn't believe how rude they were. They just, you know, they did not have a good process at all. So we ended up not liking them at all. So you just, you know, it's like hiring anybody. You get on the phone, you start building rapport and figuring out if they have what you're looking for. From my experience, they all seem to be in approximately that $200 to $250 an hour range. They all seem pretty willing to work with you. There's sometimes, you know, an early, we have a clause in our arrangement so that we don't spend more than $3,500 on the first month, because we know we have to put money up front for them to analyze and everything. But we can negotiate hours. We can say, hey, we don't want to spend more than this number of hours per month, you know, so.
Interesting.
And,
Thanks.
and there's no contract, so you can end it whenever you want it to. I mean, there's no, you're not committed for any length of time. You can end it tomorrow. Or 3 days or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd be
Yeah.
happy to pass along the name that we used. And I mean, I'd pass you all 4 people that I talked to and tell you what I thought about them. Or you just Google it and start making appointments, whatever. Just email me if you want more info.
Yeah, I'd heard about this a year ago and did some looking. You're the first person I've known in community that has gone that route. You know, we're pre-revenue, so it's early for us to need that or be able to afford it. But I'm just curious about platforms, experiences, you know, kind of, as you said, how committed you are to a set number of hours. Sounds like you can just decide on a whim, and then any time after that, you can just end it, which is certainly a lot easier than having a hire. It's a lot more involved. So
My sense was about 1,500 per month was kind of the threshold. If you can't spend 1,500 a month on it, then you might not get any traction with anybody. $2,500 a month didn't seem too hard to get somebody to get some traction on.
Interesting.
cool.
So,
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, yeah, we wouldn't, I don't know when we wouldn't have been able to do this when we were pre-revenue for sure. But right now it's like we're driving a train and we have a 7-year-old driving it. And the train is going 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, kind of ready, you know, the train operator has crayons and you're ready for somebody who can, who's got some illustration experience.
I mean, in our case, part of the issue was that we had a CFO that wasn't doing any of the work, and we couldn't get her to do any of the work, and she was sitting in that spot. So we had to get to the point where, I mean, she left, she initiated the departure. I mean, that's another really big piece of learning that I would advise other people is, and I heard it too, I just didn't act on it quick enough, is, you know, when you have somebody on your team that's not the right fit, like when you feel that, you've got to act on it sooner rather than later. And I took too long to act on it.
Yeah, that's really challenging. You know, and you end up with the, you know, you're bought in and you're kind of waiting for the person, you know, you hope that they can make the growth that they need. But sometimes they can step it up and sometimes they can't. And sometimes it can mend and sometimes it can't. And
Well, I know from kind of a bottom-in standpoint, internships or fellowships are a way to test drive relatively low employees, but at a board level, it's interesting to be able to test drive someone who's going to be driving decisions that affect the direction of the company.
yeah.
But it also sounds like this is not a route where any of those people are willing to come off platform and essentially commit, you know, should your needs scale.
Well, no, there is a provision for that. I think it's a little bit of a stiff penalty. So when I read the contract yesterday, I was like, that was the only part that gave me pause, but I can see how they really can't afford to do this without this clause. And it's sort of like a, you know, a personnel agency. So if somebody does decide to step over, they either have to be separated from you entirely for a full year without doing any work through that firm. So there's a full 1 year break, or you can bring them on board, but whatever their salary is, that company gets 25% of it for the first year. So it's a buyout.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, but yeah, if we were doing really well, we could buy them out. We could bring them over. We could offer equity. I mean, we could do any number of things.
Yeah. Yeah, assuming it progresses, right? It really opens up some opportunities there. I had someone propose an idea to me this year, or this week rather, about getting together a group of people that when an idea or an opportunity opens up, or someone has something, that you can step in and help launch it. And I'm sure that there is a term for that, but I am forgetting what it is, you know, if it's a studio or which one of the different things it is. And it's kind of caught my attention. And I know that Elijah and I have kicked around this idea a little bit. I think the words he's mentioned is like a startup hit squad or something, you know, like you have this idea, you bring in your star team, you get something going, and then stand it up and maybe spin it out, or keep it going.
I think that's a really interesting idea. I'd like to know more about that, because I have often felt like, you know, there's all these startup things happening in the community. Mostly I don't know about them anymore. I used to know about them. But I've also always thought, like, I mean, maybe it's a little bit too early for me, but I mean, I would like to be able for those people to call me and ask questions, and it doesn't happen really.
Yeah.
Once in a while.
Yeah. The thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is how can you set it up? You know, if somebody has an idea, how do you share equity in a way that makes sense? How do you take on these projects, but then eventually be able to spin it out? And if it's not something that's like a high value acquisition, but just something that's good for the community, how do you pull like a small portion of the revenue to then fund the future work that you're doing, or give you some sort of, like, for lack of a better term, you know, like a pension for the work that you did with that project? You know, do you structure it as an ESOP? Do you structure it as through a co-op? Do you use one of those platforms that then splits your share of the thing? But how do you pull in the people to get these things stood up? And I feel like something like this is, you know, and this is not a very eloquent explanation of what it is I'm trying to say here, but I feel like something like this is really needed for our state, because we have so many different opportunities and so many challenges that can be worked on, but our talent pool is pretty thin. And so if we could find a way to, like, quickly work on the thing and get it going, you know, that first initial lift can be pretty heavy, but once it's stood up and it is going, it then becomes a lot easier to keep it going. How is all this sounding? What are you guys hearing from what I'm talking about?
Well, I think all of this makes sense. I think, you know, this is kind of what I have my head in with zebras and steward ownership structures. The question becomes, you know, when you use words like spin something out, that translates to me in startup speak as exit and transfer of ownership from one party to another. And I'm just not sure that model is ever going to get places in the economic periphery, let's say, that aren't alpha global cities development, right? I think that we have to have a different model that involves ownership that doesn't rely on the almighty exit for reasons to get involved. I have never, and I will gladly take counter examples, I have never seen a party get involved who's getting involved for the hope of having an exit, which is most of venture capital, that contributes, you know, day to day to the mission of the company. And I know that there there must be
Hear,
those
hear.
people. But I just don't, like the reason we're not attracting the people is because we're trying to duplicate a model born in Silicon Valley and born in Manhattan, which doesn't really work for that, doesn't attract those kinds of people. So yeah, probably deeper conversation about what that looks like at a bylaw level, at an equity level, and at a, at a voting level in terms of how the company's steered.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think in my ideal vision, you would have something that the revenue, you could have revenue sharing across the whole value chain. You could have, you could support some of the communities where it's maybe a really necessary service in a community, but the economic driver isn't quite as potential or isn't quite as large in that community. But that is probably down the road after you have a really strong and stable core that then can support some of the more peripheral sort of work. But I don't know that the exit is really the right thing. I guess what I'm thinking of is that you get to a place where you just have so much weight as an organization that it becomes very hard to be nimble or to like change directions or to like take on different projects. And so I wouldn't want there to be so much organizational debt, with the staff commitment, kind of like with tech debt, where you just spend so much time keeping up the past code, so much time keeping up the past organizational activities that you can't take on new things. And I guess that's part of just like training in and training up people to then step into the roles, but you'd have to be really good at getting the
So what are we talking about here? Are we talking about, can you just like name this general topic for me so I make sure I'm on the same page with you?
What do you think we're talking about? What are you hearing?
So I mean, okay, yes, I agree with Brad that like, actually asking these overall questions about like, how are we going about this? Exit, is that the right method? Revenue sharing, all those questions, that makes sense. But are you talking about having a group of people accessible in our talent sphere to be used fractionally to launch various different businesses?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Okay.
and I guess I want to
Okay.
hear if that's what other people are hearing as well. Yeah.
I mean, I guess, but that might be part of it. I think for me, it's more about how these things shape up, Laura. I think that it is a reshaping of the entire lens of how you look at what is the reason for a company to be run. And as long as we have accelerators that are concerned, that put the things in this the things in this left column ahead of the things in the right column, that maybe give a nod to the things on the right, but really say, but we live in a world of this magenta column, right? You're never going to get the outcome that we're kind of talking about here. You're always going to have an exit focused outcome. So I think for me, it's first about forming a different kind of organization. And you're not going to get traditional VC to jump at that, because the only thing that's in it for them is giving up power and lower expectations on the overall returns. So why would they be interested? So forget about it. But that means the funding is going to have to come from places that are interested in seeing social public good done through commercial activity. And if you're going to attract millennials and Gen Z that want to change the world and are willing to work for $80,000 a year instead of $180,000 a year, then you're going to have to show that you're serious about it in how you run the company. So that's I think the line of distinction. And I don't know how you convert existing organizations. If you've got a cap table that's filled with traditional VC, I don't know how you're ever going to get that organization to become something like we're talking about here. Maybe you can, if you had an extraordinary board, but I think that probably, we're talking about companies that are at their very beginnings, probably have fewer than 5 employees. But I'm curious about where those limits really come in when that starts.
I think it's easier to get started with those smaller companies. I agree. I think it would be very hard to change the momentum of an existing venture-backed organization. And I guess that's where, for me, I would probably be most interested in trying to form something new. But I don't know that it necessarily has to have a formation. And I think you could have an association or have like a group of people who are interested, kind of like the identified talent pool, and then if somebody's motivated on a problem, could then work on it. I'm spinning around with some of the structure of Alaska version 3, where we have worked to intentionally raise up opportunities, but not say this is what we think the right solution is, but to just raise them up and then hope to identify the people who then want to work on it. But
well, I mean, I think the theory on that is that the data or the data will reveal the direction.
Mhm.
And I think there's some truth in that. I just wanted to say, like, I wouldn't take the cap table strategy completely off the table, because, if you had let's say you had a great energy innovation in Alaska that needed that had a lot of support and eventually did get to that exit, and that was a method to make that company much larger. For example, one of the reasons I think about exit for us is because we will get past our limits, and I want to be able to turn it over to somebody who can take that further. But I think the problem is if your invest and exit being the only opportunity for people to become interested, if that's your only method, then it's incredibly limiting. And I think that's what Brad is saying is you can't have that be the only structure. It's too limiting, and it rules out a whole bunch of other people that could be getting involved.
Well, and critically, it's not about it not, that's true. It's not just about it not being the only structure, though. It's about fiduciary responsibility that a board has, taking second or perhaps third priority to other priorities that the organization has. And that I just don't know how you're going to get a traditional group of investors to go along with that. There are people working on this with social investing, where investors know what they're getting into. They know that they're getting into 2x growth, not 10x growth. And they know that they're getting into an organization that will say, I mean, some do this. Patagonia wrote an amazing letter to their customers that basically said, summarized, we realize that we're making a tremendous amount of revenue from monogramming our clothing. And we also know that the process of doing that is making sure that these pullovers, which should be in use for a decade, right? Like this should last 10 years if I take care of it. They're ending up in landfills when people leave these organizations and they're not being worn. And so we can't conscience that. And therefore we are no longer going to do this. And they cut that entire source of revenue off for the company. That's leadership. And that is not
but you can do that.
from a lot of
you
folks.
Can do, 100%, but it doesn't, any corporation can make those choices.
But often they don't. And
Sure.
they don't because they
Yeah.
have a board that's
argument there.
committed to maximizing quarterly returns. And so
Oh,
that's
but that
the critical
again
difference.
has to do with leadership and, what is the internal culture that you've developed? I mean, Patagonia is a great example of a great model.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious about kind of what those, what that looks like in terms of the board. How do I set up my organization so that if I disappear tomorrow, the people that are involved are going to go on? It's not just my leadership, it's things that are baked into the DNA of the company, it's things that are baked into the bylaws, so that the board is constrained from pursuing maximum profitability at the expense of the other commitments that they publicly made. And that's the hard part, because new people will come in. And money moves upward, and the faster the wheel is spinning, the more big money is going to get involved that's interested in only creating more money. I think it's just a law of physics, maybe a law of finance. But I think the question is not how do you sort of go through that alive, but it's how do you prevent that from taking hold in the first place? How do you weed your garden before it's filled with dandelions? That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. Those are the tools I'm looking for right now.
That's interesting, because I think I'm trying to figure out the other side of that. I'm trying to figure out the employee side. And so for me, what I'm trying to grapple with is, how do I say this? I'm going to kind of think out loud here. I know I want to work on challenges that are going to have a positive impact in a community. And I want to work on social impact work. And a lot of times that work is being done at nonprofits. And I feel like I have this choice that I have to make of either that I can work at a for-profit company where I can make good amounts of money and I can then be financially secure for the rest of my life, or I can work at a nonprofit company and I can make much less and I can feel good, but it's going to move slow. And when I leave, it's just going to kind of like, I'll have made an impact, but then I'm out. And I want to work on these issues, and I want to do it in a sustainable, community-minded way. But I also want to make sure that, frankly, the nonprofits that I work for, they ask a ton of their employees, and then they can't compensate them for it. You get a bunch of psychic pay knowing that you're doing good work, and I feel like there must be something in the middle there. And so, how can you set it up so that you can do this work, you can be invested, you can build something, and you can be fairly compensated for it? Because I feel like the work needs to be done, but to incentivize doing the work, like you need some pay on the other side. And I feel like that's part of why we don't have the people doing the work at the rate that it should be done.
And that is the elephant in the room, right? What is fair compensation for CFO? What is fair compensation for CEO? Speaking person, yeah. I think that's the question of how, the fact that there's a 10x or more chasm between the best paid executive directors at nonprofits and the best paid chief executive officers at companies. I think it's far beyond 10x now. That was 10 years ago. Shows that there's a disconnect there. And to me, there's not much that can be done on the nonprofit side to bring these unrealistic budgets down for corporate boards, but there have to be corporations that can say, we actually can innovate and we can attract talent, and we can do so for reasonable salaries. We can have a board that accepts reasonable pay, which is perhaps not even six figures for everyone. And that's just not happening right now.
Yeah, I just like to chime in. I think that a lot of this is very interesting conversations. I think that I'm with you on Ryan in terms of like the nonprofit for-profit kind of dilemma is really significant, I think, across the board. And there's kind of a gap in there. To me, just nonprofit, the whole concept of it, just kind of like reaching out for your hand, with their hands out time after time after time, is just like, it's not really sustainable. It's not really, I don't know, beneficial. I think it, on some level, it kind of hinders the growth of the organization and their mission in a lot of ways. So I think that there's a lot of that going on. And once again, I also feel like the solutions to this conversation is going to come from a blockchain company and a new innovation. I mean,
You muted yourself, Elijah.
You can basically
Muted again.
God. You can basically put all of the constraints that you want in your organization into a computer program that then, when the executables are met, the tokens are distributed, or, the organization votes on how to distribute the tokens. And the securities laws and all that stuff is kind of falling into a mess, really, but there's just so much going on and the regulations are so far behind that I think that on some level it's almost like let them catch up later and just like make the product, make the organization, make the structure. And even companies that have broken securities laws have been fined with really just slap on a wrist, $1 million fines for billion-dollar companies and stuff like that. I mean, it's been, and there's just a ton of innovation work going, and they are like these DAOs that I'm talking about. It's like basically you put a pool of people with some capital behind it or whatever, and then they vote and organize and step up and do a project, and when they finish that project, the tokens, which are have associated liquid value associated with them, are distributed. And I really like a lot of the companies are doing really interesting fair launch stuff where the founding team holds like 10 or 15% of the company, as opposed to 55 or whatever like that, and really puts a lot more allocation to value in the growth and forward progress of it, as opposed to the being the first people to show up with the idea. So I just, once again, I think that, and for anybody that's interested and kind of has a very specific solution that they can kind of like feed me, I would be willing to try to find a company or a solution in this blockchain space that would work. I mean, I've even kind of thought about this on kind of an entrepreneurial startup where, you have a meeting like this, and then say we're talking about X solution, everybody that shows up receives basically would be called a non-fungible token, but a unique token that says, I was at this meeting, I participated, and then you could keep adding these things to kind of show your use case. And then once you get further along and it gets more serious, you could kind of like distribute more tokens, figure out, if there's some liquidity to raise, in value of the tokens to get the thing going forward to the next place. And I think it's all open source. It's very transparent. It's very, what you're getting into as you're doing it. And it's all accountable. You can say, I don't think, if you're leading this project that you've put in 5 hours, I don't think you deserve, 10% of this company or whatever. So I don't know. I'm just also very excited about that stuff. And like I said, if anybody has a kind of real specific problem or something in that zone, I would be really looking forward to hearing about it and see if I could come up with or find a solution that already exists for that. So, yeah.
I'd be interested, Elijah. I know we've talked about talking more about blockchain. I think smart contracts and the blockchain public ledger are probably going to be useful 21st century tools for setting economic containers for huge numbers of people when you're trying to have hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people involved and you want to incentivize certain behaviors. I think the blockchain is probably going to be a useful tool. But when we're talking about just 10 individuals or fewer in an organization, I probably need to understand better how the blockchain comes into that. But I will say, as a couple of simple low-tech tools to drive some of these relationships, one of them is complete transparency of salary with all positions. So you never say we're hiring a CFO or we're hiring a lead engineer. You say we're hiring a lead engineer for $85,000. You say we're hiring a CFO for $114,000. And then you're solving both the ridiculous compensation problem and you're solving somewhat of an equity problem, because then whether a white man like myself or a woman of color applies to the position, there's no question of salary negotiation. It is what it is. And I think that's one of the ways to kind of move into a more transparent way of running companies, just really committing to that practice.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's some other tools as well, including blockchain.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bradley. Anytime you want to chat, I'd love to chat about that with you. You know, and just I think it's the future, you know, and with the being able to be open source, you know, to be able to do, you know, token releases, you know, where it's not at $80,000, you know, a thing. It's, you know, this you know, month or whatever, this quarter, you know, this job pays this amount, you know, and if, you know, you fulfill that obligation, you receive that payment. And then if you are brought on forward, then, you know, you can do it. Or if somebody else, you know, feels that they can take over and do a better job. I don't know. I think.
But why do you need a smart contract for that instead of just a traditional paper contract?
Well, you don't, you can, I mean, you don't need a smart contract for that by any means. No, you don't. But I just think that the fluidity, I think that there's just a ton of things that you can do that, you know, people are now still just figuring out, you know. I mean, they've got so many people that are working in all these different spaces. I think we're now up to like 11,000 blockchain companies, whereas, you know, when I started saying this, it was around 5,000. And when I started saying it also, the top 100 companies, the 100th company was a $100 million company. And now the 100th company is a $1 billion company. So the whole space has over 10x in the last like 2 years, pretty much. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I'm into it. And yeah, I'd love to have a conversation about it at some point with anybody.
I think the autonomous organizations and the blockchain stuff, it is very interesting to me. I think that the business logic behind it and what it enables is the most interesting part to me. Frankly, I don't understand the technology and how it works. I think I have a loose understanding of it, but it's the logic that is behind it that is really appealing. And, you know, a specific case, like I'm trying to figure out how to get some kelp up into Anchorage to be able to use for kelp fertilizer. And right now I want to do that with one kelp farmer, but eventually I want to do that with 1,000 kelp farmers across the state of Alaska. And I want to make sure that they all get paid a fair rate. And I would like to be able to give them a revenue share of what the end product is selling for. And I also need to figure out, like, if we've got somebody who is drying that kelp, you know, how are they going to get compensated? What's the rate for that? If there's somebody who's pulling it off the line, how do they get compensated fairly? And so if you can track the entire value chain, and then you can track the revenue on the other side, and then you can just have pre-agreed, transparent contracts in place, then once the sale is made, it just spits it out. You know, when it is getting started, I think that it absolutely is something that you could get started without a blockchain in place. And I think that that's probably the simplest, lowest drag, lowest friction way of figuring out what the business logic is and what the rules are for distribution and what is fair. Because I think in the beginning, you're just going to spend a ton of time trying to code that and implement that into a contract, and then just have to renegotiate the contract and change it all. But I think that kind of the work that Bradley is doing to make sure that you've got the organizational structure, the board structure, the system, and the system logic in place, that's really important. You need to have the right holding environment for a value chain, for an exchange like that to come together.
I just wanna, I'm gonna have to hop off in a couple minutes, and I just wanted to throw out two things. And these are just the things that are on my mind, and I want them to be considered as a part of this AKV3 conversation. So these might be things that would factor into the retreat conversation or even startup weekend. But two things, and this is also in conjunction to the reflection on the thing that they did a few weeks ago, which was the challenge, you know, where they were putting out challenges. I can't remember what it's called, reverse pitch. And there was really two things that stand out in my mind at the time and even still now, and Bradley has really made it come back to the top. And one of them is we need to identify, we know one of our biggest problems worldwide is unequal money distribution. the haves and the have-nots, just very simple. Too many people that have too much, and too many people that have not just have way too little. And Alaska is a very strong participant in this. The second thing is Alaska should be really churning out innovation for environmental change. And it's not happening. You know, when I saw on that reverse challenge that one of the ideas, one of the challenges was to have slaughterhouses all over the state, I was like, holy shit, nobody vetted that. And, you know, like, wow, that's taking us in the wrong direction. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say is environmental and income and distribution. And I think it kind of connects to a lot of the things that people are saying today. So those are the things on my mind when it comes to AKV3.
If I can throw my 1.5 cents on that one, I think exactly that's one of my whys this group exists, because we have multiple opinions about things, about ideas. So some people believe that we do need to have that distribution of slaughterhouses so that people can have access to it. And then I see also your point that, well, we do not need, because if we think in the long term. So we have multiple ideas coming that they basically collide each other. You have the most obvious, which I'm not saying that it's a good one, but it's the most obvious that it's out there, is green versus carbon fuels. And you have people that will swear that's one option and not the other one, and vice versa. And I think that's part of what this group exists, because we have been entangled so long in those debates that seem bipolar that we sometimes didn't see that there's a gray area in between. Gray in a sense that it's in between black and white, not gray in the way that we use the word in this context. And that's actually a good point. That's what I think this group is about. And I think that's the biggest message that we can send out there. Most likely somebody is smart, or even we all together can find a solution to that point that satisfies what you are saying and satisfies what other people with other points of view are saying. That's, I think, did I get the idea across?
Yeah.
Okay. And the same with fair. How fair is the distribution in salary in Alaska? It's a fair $1,000 PFD. It's fair not PFD. It's fair to import all the fractional executives that we need. Is it fair to wait to build those right here in the house? What's the fair point? Because we can actually just open the gates and bring people here, but I'm being a lot of devil advocate here. I can see a lot of people